Last week our channel reached 50,000 views, and after just barely even Saturday now, we're up to 51,991, almost 52,000. So we're garnering possibly about a little over 2,000 views per week, and we need to up that a little bit more. So I'm asking you guys to please like, subscribe, and share my videos so we can keep it going. Hey, the other projects I got in the stove right now. I have that FE that's about to be completed, and I did a full documentation of what's going on in there. And then we have a 1,000 horsepower, possible 1,000 horsepower small block build. The only thing that's holding me back with a little apprehension is that the crank rods are heavy. Any rotating mass has got too much stroke. So I think it's gonna cost me power when I get to about 9,000 plus. If it was light in the internals, like the rod journals and everything, I'm sure. It's pushing about 435 CFM at 28 on a Brodix Neil. So 1 4-barrel Dominator. So that's gonna be a good one. All right, and I'm gonna follow through with the build-up. I'll show everybody the bottom of the crank and everything, and the cylinder head. I'll show a lot of the stuff, the specifications, and then I'm building an engine for somebody out there in the TV world, and he will compete, and this is going to be roughly 2-bolt main block. It's a budget build for now, and we'll try to go as fast as we can. I think we can make 800 horsepower, 850 with this combination. I could easily attain that if it's completely NA, but I think he wants to squeeze a little bit of nitrous. So the way the configurations, it still would make good power considering. Okay, and then the other two is I'm finishing up a 280Z block with all the heads and everything. Boy, that's been it's hard because there's a lot of design elements there that are not really ideal from a standpoint of trying to build something healthy. And last but not least, I'm going to complete the FE block that had nothing but problems when we had another company's block, and that really threw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. And that's going to be completed soon. And from what I can look at right now, I think this might make 700 horsepower on pump gas. 650, 700, I think. And also I will I've been videotaping the whole assembly process, going through assembling the block and everything, the heads. I think this is going to be pretty doggone good. So in fact, if I have some money left in the butt, I will go ahead and put that on the dyno. And the guy's been so patient. Both of these guys have been so patient with all these things going on, parts availability and all that. Wow, we're in a real bad shape right now. Anyway, that being said, I will proceed with these projects and finish them up, and I will videotape it with the owner's permission. Okay, so please like and subscribe, share my videos so we can expand Ben Alameda channel on YouTube. All right, guys, thank you very much. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye. We will do a little bit of a technical video, and a lot of you have stated to me, please do a little bit more technical explanations or subjects. So that street thing with 600 horsepower pump gas, 302 and 351 was very impressive. But please don't forget us more technically minded viewers, and we will do just exactly that. Now, we will touch on the subject of intake and exhaust ports. Here's a flow bench. They evaluate an intake and exhaust ports very good, but there is a little bit of a shortcoming, because if you design your heads or port your heads according to flow, you're gonna be up in la la land. The reason is, what the flow bench will tell you, the bigger you make, the more it flows. Definitely not the right way to do things. In fact, on my Facebook page, on the very top of Ben Alameda Racing, I did several years back an article about airflow on a running engine and airflow on a flow bench. What are the differences? And when you look at the respondents down below, people have told me, did you read the people responding to your article? There are a lot of them are the premier head porters or cylinder head guys in the country. And I look and go, oh yeah, okay. Anyway, I appreciate the feedback from everybody there. I don't know everything. Who does? Okay. At this point, it's just what level of knowledge do we have, information at hand, and then we think how we proceed with what to do with the engine that we have, displacement, RPM, so forth and so on. This one here will tell you go bigger and it'll flow better. Okay, but I would say is that CC for a given amount of displacement, you gotta match that up. Okay, and remember, this measures port restriction. The better the port works or the better it is, it's least effective. Now it's a matter of shape and port volume when you get to that level. Because in anything, this will say bigger. Just like I remember back in West LA years ago, there was one guy at Super Shops, and we call him Mr. 850 double pumper, because everybody walks in there. I remember we were there one day and a guy in a 4-cylinder Pinto, or was it a Capri? No, it's a Pinto. He got 2000, I built 2000, and the guy comes up, hey, what carburetor do you recommend me? And we were waiting for the answer because it's a friend of ours, a distant friend, and it says 850 double pumper. If we had a Vega or a Pinto or a Capri 4-banger, V6 Capri, 850 double pumper. Everything's 850 double pumper because he said it flows the best. Okay, but even if you have a stock 289 or 350, he'll tell you 850 double pumper. Anyway, that said, let's get a little bit more on the serious side. Intake and exhaust. Now, the intake, when it's evaluated on the flow bench, will do a certain CFM of 28 or whatever, or 10 or 5, whatever numbers you choose here to make as your reference for flow. The problem is the same thing with the exhaust. You flow test this and it goes out the exhaust, it dumps it out. And you can say this exhaust port flows great and this intake port flows great. Okay, but you know what? That's just looking at half the scenario. That's what's going on. Really, to tell you the truth, the intake and the exhaust port are dancing partners. Just like in team figure skating, you have the woman and the man. For this explanation, I will tell you the exhaust is the man and the intake is the woman. Why is that? When you look at the intake and exhaust, they can be impressive. But as a teamwork, do they gel together? You can have two perfectly good skaters, but do they work together in tandem and create a good thing? Same thing with the intake and exhaust port. If they are mismatched or they don't work together, you can do all your testing on the intake port flow, exhaust port flow. That is null and void. It won't show you anything. Now, why did I say it's like team figure skating? The exhaust largely pulls on the intake. You have 4-stroke engines, what they say. That's such an outdated description. You got intake, compression, ignition, and exhaust. Forget one. Overlap. Without overlap, when the intake and exhaust are open together, all right, they're cross signaling to each other, responding to each other, just like those skaters. We have to look into that obvious fact that when the piston's coming up, the intake valve starts to open during overlap or the overlap phase. Without overlap, when the piston comes up, and by the time it comes down, you open the valve, it's too late. There's a lag. Okay, you have to open the piston, the valve, intake valve, way before it gets to TDC, and the exhaust is partially open then. Okay, and that cross signal, the intake sees a low pressure area from the fast exiting exhaust, yanks at an intake while the piston's still going up. With that scenario right there, the flow will come back up to the intake port. There you go. So in essence, the guy in the skating team will start skating fast, towing the woman, and then at the right moment throws her up in the air, and she does her spin at whatever height the guy sets her up with, and of course her in very many ways as well. She becomes like the intake port. When she executes her movement up in the air, it's like the intake port trying to keep the fuel and air mixed through swirl and tumble, and then when she lands perfectly, it's like the intake port coming in to the combustion chamber and dispersing the fuel into a more homogeneous, more combustible mixture, finely mixed. Okay, mystified situation where you don't have much rain or rich area, finely dispersed. That is her job. But the guy, the exhaust, yanked her first and threw her effectively up in the air. Same thing on an intake and exhaust port relationship. That intake wouldn't do its job if it didn't pull, okay, by the exhaust effectively to set it up. Okay, so I remember one day when I had the Yates heads first came up to me in the early 90s, and nobody really ran that. I was approached by Rick Smith from TFS at that point in time to run one of his pro stock heads. And my mentor, Charles Stevens, and I sat down. He goes, well, we can get it if you want. He's basically giving it to us almost for nothing for us to run it. And I think Gene Deputy and some other guy was given the opportunity. And I thought about it, and I declined it. And I said, no, I'll run a Yates, because I was looking at availability. Just in case I damage one, I can always get another casting injury. This were one of a kind. I don't even think he's got 3 or 4 sets of that TFS Pro stock head, then owned and ran by Rick Smith. This is Racing Jason's cylinder head that we were talking about, and I was mistaken that they said there's 4 made. That's what I said, was 4 made. It's actually 6 were made. So we really don't know where they're at right now, but they were very, very few. And for all practical purposes, this is an excellent cylinder head designed by Rick Smith when he used to run TFS. Now TFS is, like I said, a different company. And I tell you what, I did not choose this cylinder head because I needed spares. And the Yates to me was available, not on a limited basis, but a lot. Anyway, so that's what I started to run NA on a field of boosted and supercharged and nitrous cars. I kind of figured I'll be right there, and I just need to RPM the dog pile out of my engine. Today, TFS is run entirely by different people. At that point in time, they were strictly Ford. Here you go. So I got a hold of that, and I was looking at my full bench. I go, what in the world am I gonna do with this thing? Because when it came to me, it was raw. I'm gonna show you the picture right now. This is how it looks like. What we have here is 2 Yates. One is a raw SC1 casting, but the C3 came just like this. Only the head ports or the raw port was right here, a lot lower. Now, it came like this. You have to, at that particular time, in the late 80s, early 90s, there was hardly any CNC programs out there. because it's not really practiced at that time. People were doing everything on the bench and grinding them, and like what I was doing, line of sight, everything, making sure you make a template. All the short side ranges are the same. Anyway, it started like this and ends up like this. Like I said, 2.5 months. I had to determine what valves to use, and at that particular time, I ended up with, I think, a 210, okay? Which now I'll go to a 216, 217 with a 158 or 156 exhaust. The chamber is raw, and when you look at this thing here, this is how the chamber looks like. Hardly anything there, okay? Today, I would put a one, like I said, maybe as small as a 156 to 158 for an exhaust valve, put as big as I can on the intake. We'll touch upon why we need a smaller exhaust port or exhaust valve with the newer castings, the high port castings, because we tend to over scavenge the exhaust and draw the fuel from the incoming intake column straight to the exhaust. So the only way you can limit that is make that exhaust port or exhaust valve smaller. And the motorcycle head I did back east and helped design the existing profile on the cylinder head had a lot smaller exhaust valve for NA. Now for a high speed, very high speed, it seemed like it needed a little bit of help, and the larger exhaust valve will definitely help it. But we'll see, because we're doing some other new configuration in the valves and hopefully maintain the smaller exhaust valve and pick up the flow significantly for extreme RPMs like 10, 11,000 RPM. So here's the raw chamber. I had to make my own, each and every one, CC everything, make sure all the same. Okay, and then here's the exhaust port, and here's the exhaust port then. Very, very small. So again, you have to profile your exhaust port floor, exhaust port roof, make sure you're all there and that they flow equally. And oh, one thing here, see this little holes here? Those are coolant holes to the exhaust intake, exhaust head stud, just to cool it down. Because at high RPM it gets hot, induces tension here, and they try to keep it as cool as possible. But here's the head in raw form and ported form, and there it is, and there it is. Where do you put those? Okay, so it's you can move your intake a little bit away from the cylinder wall, or whichever way you want to position the head on the block. That's all up to you. But here's already machined. It's very complex. It's not for the beginners. When you get to this level, and I was in it in 1989, 1990, that was a big transformation or an eye-opener for me. Okay, and with the experience, it opened up all other things, actually more questions than answers in my search for power. Remember, at that point in time, I was the only NA guy running in the Grand National versus 5.0 shootout. That was big back then. Okay, everybody else had turbo nitrous, and I'm the only a little crazy guy there running NA. And my purpose there was to learn more about my trade, okay, racing engine building. And I was going through, of course, my diesel and automotive classes, graduated there and went to aerospace, jet turbines, reciprocating aircraft engines, which are piston powered aircraft engines, more like flat force big Porsche or Volkswagen engines. And then of course went to another 20 plus years of advanced engineering conferences, applied science courses paid for by my mentor. With the racing and all that, I started going faster on the motor than I was on nitrous, which was amazing. Okay, in a span of such a short time, because I understood more what was going on, and it was a plus. And now when I go back to nitrous or turbo, I have a better understanding, and I think, of course, things got faster from that point on. Like I said, knowledge is power. Power is all in your hands. Your head here and your head right there. Okay, guys? Let's continue on with the video. Now, as soon as I started pouring the head, I tell you not, it took me to make the combustion chamber, intake and exhaust. It took me about 2.5 months. And then when I put it on my race car, I went out there, and this doggone thing went 930 at 149. Eventually ran into the 8s. Now, I was curious. Okay, now I have the heads. I took it off. I put it on the same exact bench, and it came out at 283 CFM. I was scratching. How can it be so fast? Why did it do that? This is a street head. Now, after I evaluated the exhaust was also excellent. I think it was like 265. Eventually, through the years, I found out it's this relationship between the two. Plus, the combustion chamber being compact. At that particular time, combustion chambers were 64 cc, 62 cc from the factory. By the time you do your magic and unshrouding and all that, that doggone thing could have been 72, 74 cc. When you have a big combustion chamber, it takes a lot of heat, or it takes in a lot of heat, and you lose your combustion efficiency, your thermal efficiency. If you have a compact chamber, everything's more concentrated in the middle. There's not much heat expansion or heat losses all around. Everything's contained, and you can have better power. And at that particular time, that Yates was 40 cc, 283 CFM, and 265, 270. Going that fast? That looks like the head was functioning like a 340, 360 CFM standard head. But the fact of the matter is 283 CFM. Hardly nothing. And then I kept my mouth shut. I was like, oh wow, what did I find out here? Again, because of the excellent exhaust, and it's standing up like this, okay? The intake has a high port angle, the exhaust got a high port angle. Not as much as the SC1 that they want, high enough compared to the stock production or base castings. When they come in, the exhaust pulls it effectively and comes out. Now, the old school had a low port. When the intake and exhaust are open during overlap. Okay, I always talk about overlap because to me that is the most important phase of how an engine becomes a racing engine or a high performance engine. Without overlap, we all have tractor engines, okay? We all have, we can all race our freaking tractors out there. There's not gonna be much difference. They're all gonna run in 2,500 RPM, they're out of breath. Now, the low port, the port comes in through the short side, comes into the combustion chamber, comes out, and through the exhaust again on a low port. The pulling signal is not that strong. Now, on the Yates, you have it high port, high exhaust port. It gets yanked when the two valves are open and goes to the chamber and come out to the exhaust. Okay? You have this trying to pull up to the chamber and out and down again. Here you got this. All right? You have a, remember, they always say an engine's an air pump. Well, I hate to simplify things. Actually, there are an engine is a processor. How it takes in air with chemical interaction creates combustion, and how effectively it burns that and exits it out will show you the potential. Without this interaction between the intake and exhaust at a low rate, remember RPM is horsepower, right? The more you do work, the more horsepower you're gonna get. How much work over time? That's horsepower. If you process this and you're doing it slow, it's not gonna happen. All right, now, coming back. The high port as well. When the valve closes, okay, flow is flowing through or to the chamber and then ignition. But what actually happens too is that when the valve actually closes, the port now has pretty good velocity because it's straight down as opposed to that, low port up to the short side. it rams into the valve, to the closed valve, it stacks up, okay? Creates this pressure wave right there going through, and you want that to not go to the top of the carburetor or throttle body, and you'll get reverse signal there. And when you time it correctly, when the next valve opens up, the ram pulses start to come in, and it'll do an artificial supercharging into your combustion chamber. Okay, you got to work that wave, that pressure wave, going between the intake valve closes and stacks up, and then when it comes back, make sure the intake valve is on. Boom, comes in. That's why you see this. The Ford back in '85, they have the long, 87, 88. They have the long throttle body, okay, through the upper half of the manifold, through the lower manifold. What you're doing is that intake port, you're trying to utilize that pressure wave, okay, and they try to stack it all as long as they can for torque. Now the TPI on the Chevrolet, the IROC, looks so much better than the Ford. The Ford is ugly. I mean, I look at that, I go, man, it's going to the passenger side shock tower. Huh, it sure is ugly. The TPI, aesthetically looking, it's right there in front. Beautiful. And then it goes to a plenum, then you see it snake around to the other block, to the other side. Ford could have done the same thing. Okay, but I don't know why. Chevy, I got to give it to you guys. You guys do a good job. So you have the throttle body to the plenum, and then goes to the right bank. This left one goes to the left. So I mean, it's beautifully done and executed. Now, since we touched base on this, oh, and also back then, the information, which I will follow up with all the different cylinder heads for Ford. This is a Ford Windsor book, published in 1994, when everybody else was starting to realize that the Ford craze, the 5.0 craze, started by, of all people, I don't know if you guys know, Chris KAUFMANN at KAUFMANN Products, when CarCraft came up with his '82 Mustang, which became the first 460 swap into a FOXBODY. But that FOXBODY, that '82 car was all over the magazines. And I was running around with my clunky '67 Mustang then. I was going, I should update myself to the new '80s muscle car. And eventually I did, with KAUFMANN as my sponsor, and Storm and Norman. This book came out and written by Isaac Martin for HP Books. This is the Ford Windsor book by Isaac Martin, and it was published in 1994 by HP Books, and it sold quite a bunch. That was a time that people were seeking out any information to the then emerging 5.0 craze, and people wanted good information. It all came down to guys like myself who's been long-term Ford racing engine builders or racers, and they needed our information and how best to approach to making horsepower. And the picture here on the cover is one of my customers, engine. Okay, and he lives in Vegas right now, and that is his engine on the cover of the book. This was an acknowledgement part of the book by HP, and I am right there on the top part of the list with Kurt Hooker from Edelbrock Engineering Staff, George Class and Chris Huff of Coast High Performance, Charlie Bruno of Charlie's Mustang, Ed and Jenny Marsh of Windsor Fox Performance Engineering, and Rick Kemp at Portflow Design. Anyway, Chris Huff of Coast High Performance, it was founded by him and calling me up on the phone to have pizza with him at Shakey's in Torrance, which I've met with him, and we talk about how he wanted to bust into the Windsor Fords, into that world, and I suggested he do strokers, which he promptly did. And his first backer was my mentor, Charles Stevens, who basically gave him the startup support to start Coast High Performance and Probe Pistons at that time. And he eventually bought my race car, my 67 muscle car, national championship winning car, and that became their test bed to test all sorts of stroker combination, until it was bought by somebody else and eventually got stolen after the new owner had me sign a statement that I owned and won with that car, and it was my first serious race car, and somehow somebody hijacked it. Sad. But anyway, kudos to Chris Huff at Course High Performance Den, and of course George Class, where he sponsored me as well with Storm and Norman. Those were the good years. I have lots to thank for all these people. Really helped out a lot. But not everything's there, because I was saying some crazy stuff that I think the writer and the proofreader's gonna like go, this guy's crazy, because I made a statement. I got as high as 1,000 horsepower on a 351 Windsor 2-bolt block. And they go, oh, that's impossible to make that claim. And you know what? Somebody here was also a blogger on Fords and LS engines, did the same thing on a turbo setup. I've done that years ago. Made that. And he proved that only recently. He did a junkyard 351, see how far he could get. I think he went over 1,000 before it finally broke. Anyway, that's we will continue on with this. Please subscribe and like and share my videos. I need you guys' help, and because I like doing these things. I'm not getting any younger. I have so much up here. I have so much education and racing years through my mentor, Chuck Stevens, sending me all his applied science courses, advanced engineering conferences, and I got so much stuff going in my head sometimes. I'm debating if I should get very complex in my explanation, or I should keep it simple. You guys tell me, okay? This thing we just talked about right now, I think is very important. The concept of intake and exhaust, as how it relates to two team skaters in figure skating, how they function and how they do these things. Okay? We cannot be the best on ourselves. We always need somebody. Okay? As a partner, as an assistant, as a team member. That's how we become successful. No man is a mountain. And we all need everybody's help, encouragement, and dedication in order for us to be successful. It's Ben Alameda. Please again subscribe, and let's keep this going. Thank you very much, guys. Check you guys out later. Bye-bye.